Welcome to the Business of Football podcast. In this week's episode, we are here with international FIFA presenter Adriano De Monte. Now, Adriano has had various different experiences on the big stage, and he sat down on the podcast for this week's episode. Hello and welcome back to the Business of Football podcast. Today I'm with a very special guest, Adriano De Monte. How are you today? Welcome to the episode.
Thank you for having me. Going very well. Enjoying some winter time here in Milan, but all good. Great to be with you.
Yeah, fantastic. I mean, Milan, lovely country, lovely city, sorry. Is the weather quite nice up there? Is it pretty chilly?
It's chilly. I'm from Australia originally, Italian
Yeah.
origin, so the weather here in Italy, especially in the north, very different from what I'm used to in Australia. But no, here in Milan, this time of year now, it's actually quite nice. It's sunny every day, but the moment the sun disappears, it's very cold, and covering some matches pitch side in this weather is not always the most fun you can have, but no, enjoying it every moment of the year.
I'm quite interested because I know you're from Australia, so you started in England, and if you think Italy is quite bad, moving to England at the beginning of your career, what was that like? Like the culture change, because that's where it all began in football for you, isn't it?
Sure. Yeah, look, it did. Again, yeah, from Melbourne in Australia originally, my first move abroad, where I always knew my future had to be abroad. Australia is a sports loving country, but in the football world, I saw a lot more potential to grow globally. And the first stop was the UK. I was very young, just finished my studies, and look, moving there was not too difficult in terms of culturally because of the fact that very similar to what I was used to in Australia, but it was a different time. This was over a decade ago where it wasn't the social media age we live in. So it was more the difficulties more so then were the connectivity. You're not so easy just to jump on a video call or something and be able to connect with people super easily. So while it was very productive and very advantageous from a work perspective in the early stages of my career, it brought about a lot of challenges and well, I guess in some way indirectly shaped me as the person I am now. So I spent a lot of time between London and Leeds in that period, undertaking some internships and some jobs with Sky Sports, ESPN, and a few of these companies that gave me opportunities to get some experience at the highest level. And yeah, certainly made the most of it. But in terms of the cultural adjustment, it wasn't too difficult. But again, that lack of connection with my family back in Australia was probably the biggest hurdle at that point.
100%. And at the beginning, when you're going through all these different internships, did you have a strategy, or was it like, I just want to test myself, get into the waters and see where it fits, where I can make something out of it?
There's zero strategy, to be honest. Look, a lot of what I've done, and I do a lot of mentoring in the space because there's no roadmap, there's no blueprint. I think remaining open, keeping yourself adaptable, flexible, and available is how people can prosper and move forward in my world. This industry, people see 1% of the end work. I work on TV, I work pitch side, I cover the biggest matches on the planet. That's great. But that's 1% of the work. There is all the other work, like in anything with footballers in general, it's the exact same. There's so much work that goes on behind the scenes. And so I think certainly when you're younger, coming into an industry, needing to meet with people, learn about how things work and how it all functions, you just need to be as open and as accessible as possible. And so moving to the UK was as a result of some other work I had done where I had met some contacts and I had learned about the fact of, okay, it's not about who you know, but you need to know people to be able to learn and to be able to ask the questions and to be able to find where and when I can obtain some experience. And that was sort of my mantra from the early stages, and still to this day, many years on from there, I still have many random opportunities come about as a result of someone I met a decade ago. And that's the exciting part. It is also the difficult part of the industry, is that sometimes it is a little uncertain, and we're in a very interesting time with media now where it is fast paced, it's changing by the moment. So just being open and accessible to every opportunity that presents itself, for me, gives yourself the best opportunity to make the most of things that you don't even know exist. And it's something that I took on board when I was young, and I had that sort of open mind to being the best I could be, to testing myself at the highest level. And yeah, I guess it's paid dividends to this point that I've been able to carve out a career in the industry.
100%. That's really well said. I mean, that point that you mentioned there about media changing. I mean, I'm sure
Mm,
when you came in to like journalism, the way
mm,
that it's just evolved and changed with social media, was there any point where you felt like this is a bit too much now because suddenly it's going from one thing to another to just
mm.
like that?
Yeah, absolutely. And obviously, as each day goes by, you feel more of that. It's just changing so quickly. And it's how do you keep up with it? But you just have to do the best you can to channel your energy to focus on what you can do, how you can continually learn, how can you can continually improve. And again, most importantly, how can you continually adapt? And it's that adaptation again, which I said at the infancy of my career, but also now, you need to do the best you can to keep up because the reality of the media world we live in now, you do need to be active across the board. And I've always been a big believer in the traditional sense of TV and media, whereby, look, back in the day, let's talk decades back, a TV presenter would literally arrive to a studio, read what's required, do what's required, and that's that. There was a producer, there was an editor, there were others. While those roles still exist, especially when I was starting, I was very aware. One of the first things I identified was if that you are a presenter who also provides support to the team and assist with production, assist with editing, assist with script writing, you're going to be a more valuable asset. And so coming into the space, very young, very raw, my first international TV job was I was extremely young, but I had that willingness to support everyone around me and certainly not think that I'm the presenter, so I'll only focus on presenting. No, be a part of the team. I think instilling that in my mindset from the early stages has made it not easy because it's not easy to keep up with the pace of the media landscape at the moment, but just to always be constantly aware of the fact that you do need to service, assist, help, grow, learn, and keep up the pace with what's going on around you. So it is again, that's another job on top of the job, but I think it is very important to be active across the board and just ensure that you're keeping up with what's going on in this fast-paced world.
Mm, mm. And then away from that, how are you able to then switch off? Because that is
Hmm.
really intense. I can imagine you
Yeah.
just might like get overwhelmed, or especially in the beginning, like how are you able to maintain a level of calmness and belief that this is still, even though I'm doing so many different things, I
Hmm.
know that this is going to benefit me, and also I can stay calm in the moments when it gets, really intense and high pressure.
Yeah, sure. It's a really interesting discussion because again, what the viewer sees is only the last moment. That is the most important aspect of this industry. And again, when doing some mentoring with young presenters who want to make their way in the field, one thing I'm always very clear about is this point because it is important to maintain that balance, to maintain a level of calm, to find some time for yourself. Now, in the way that I currently operate, I contradict that in a way by the fact that my days, my weeks are so random that I'm really unable to plan too far in advance. What I do enforce breaks in the space. So I work as a freelancer contractor for many different TV networks globally, which is great. But at the same time, it's very random. But it does allow me flexibility that if I want to return to Australia for the Christmas period, as I do each and every year, I can take that month off and take that month to myself. So I'm very blessed in the way of I have built that flexibility where I can call the shots to a degree, to an extent, within respect. And the networks certainly respect the fact that I do move at a very fast pace and it does allow me some time to break. So that is my way to switch off. But when I'm here in Europe, moving around, traveling, train, plane every 2, 3 days, it's very difficult to just find the routine. And I think routine is very key. You speak to anyone across any industry, sleep, healthy eating, healthy habits are very important to maximizing one's daily potential, let's say. But it's just for me, it's in the mind. I think what I what I what I do, not just try to do, but what I absolutely do is when I'm in the moment and I am working, I'm always ensuring I'm keeping a level of calm before I work. And that's where you exert a lot of energy when you work, when you're live, when you're on the pitch, a lot of noise. There's 80,000 fans in the stands. It's loud. There's a lot of adrenaline. But it's in those moments where you can actually exert a lot of energy without even thinking that I do really just focus on my breathing and just keep myself very calm as if we're just having a very natural conversation now. It's exactly what I do when I'm pitch side at a match. And they're small steps, but they're small steps that certainly help the broader picture of just keeping calm, maintaining energy, and just ensuring that you're performing at an optimal level, which is super important, again, with everything else going on around you at a fast pace.
Mm. Is it easier to present at a really pristine conference event, like FIFA, for example, where everyone's sat down,
Mm,
so it's calm, but it's just you talking to the TV? Or do you find it
mm,
easier to present when you're on pitch side and the atmosphere is building?
mm.
And especially before a game, there's that tension because everyone's a bit nervous.
Yeah.
Is that harder, or do you prefer when everyone's just a bit more calm and you're just in front of the TV presenting an event?
Yeah. Look, they're two completely different environments. I think in terms of what's easier, I would definitely say working on the pitch. The reason being is because, look, there's sometimes I've done 4 or 5 matches in a week across 4 or 5 different cities and countries, and you're running on very, very low fuel. And the reason I say it's easier is because you can actually, in those key moments, feed off that energy, feed off that tension in the crowd, and that gives you the boost of energy you need for that 3 to 5 to 10 minute live hit. When you're in an event space, FIFA, UEFA, and it's a global event, an international audience, it's look, I love that. I actually prefer that. I really love hosting events, especially at that level. But it's all on you to find the energy. And look, you do naturally go into that environment and you find your spark, and then it's a very different build up. It's not when you work at a match, it is so hectic that people think you're sitting there taking notes, taking it in. You're not. There's always problems. You're always running around. You need this pass. They don't have that pass. You need to be live. Then there's tech issues. So it's just more hectic there. You're in a much more relaxed state and a much more controlled state when you're hosting events. You're looked after, you're pampered a little, you're eating well. So it's funny because I say it's easier on the pitch, but it comes with a lot more craziness, and that actually means you just need to deliver when the lights are on, when the camera's on, and I do thrive off that. But they're completely different with different challenges and different hurdles to overcome. But look, both very rewarding. But if I have to say one, I say the pitch is a lot easier because you feed off the energy that's already there.
Yeah, and I guess you're part of the event, aren't you? Like
Mm,
you're
mm,
you're you're bringing an experience to people who can't be there, but you can capture it in
for
your own
sure.
personal way. I mean, that must be just an amazing thing.
For sure, for sure. Look, again, working with different broadcasters, they have different requirements, different requests. The majority, particularly in this day and age now, the majority of broadcasters want exactly that. They want, and this is what I'm really passionate about. Sure, I can be there and give you some analysis about the match, but my analysis, I'm not an ex-player. Very often, one of my main networks I work for, beIN Sports, very often pundits for us at beIN Sports are Arsene Wenger, Ruud Gullit. Now, who am I to be analysing football when Wenger and Gullit are in the studio? I know nothing. So there is no point in utilising my slot, my time to do that. So what I'm very passionate about is bringing the fan, bringing the viewer closer to the action, closer to what I see, what I feel, and really just immerse myself in that emotion and energy and make the fan at home, or give them some value for money. It's something that I can see that Wenger, Gullit and co in the studio cannot provide. And that's really what I love to do. And it's you do, when you really immerse yourself in that experience of being at the pitch. I never take for granted being pitch side at any match, particularly those bigger matches in Champions League. It's like this is a once in a lifetime experience for fans. Every fan of these clubs would love to be there. Now I'm there. I need to do it the service, the justice of bringing them as close as I can to what I'm seeing and feeling. And it is very cool. It's a special feeling to be able to do that. And as I said, certainly never, while it's the norm now, I certainly never take for granted. I always take a second or two, depends on where I am, which stadium, just to take it in and be appreciative and grateful for the moment, and then do the best I can to deliver the best service possible to the viewer.
Hmm. What was the first event that you went to where you were like, wow, I have a real opportunity to represent, like you said, represent the normal fan? When was the first time you
Mm.
actually felt like I'm doing that in front of the camera and I can feed off
Mm.
of this energy and opportunity?
I think it was a really interesting period. We go those years back to the COVID period. They weren't the first, but they were certainly the most unique. And it was so bizarre because in the whole COVID period, My family, friends, those closest to me in Australia were basically locked up for 2 years. They couldn't leave the country. And I was in the initial stages of that. A lot of my family and friends were like, well, you're going to come back here or you stay there. Who knows what the story is? And I never had a doubt in my mind to stay here in Italy. And obviously, as things finished up, Italy, particularly my city, Milan, was the hardest hit very early on. And then suddenly we opened up and it was not back to normal by no stretch, but we were active and moving. And the fact that in that period I was able to work, and particularly if you recall the Champions League that season, there was the final 8 in Portugal, in Lisbon. And we did the quarters, the semis, and the final at the stadiums of Benfica and Sporting. And it was particularly that moment, in answer to your question, that's the first thing that came to mind, because I was in a position where there was 0 fans in the stands. And there were a lot of people around the world still in lockdown, certainly my family and friends in Australia, where they couldn't even leave their front door, essentially. And here I was traveling around Portugal and back and forth between Italy. And that was probably the moment where I felt that more so than ever before. It was a really strange time, but certainly I think that Champions League season was, I don't think I'll ever see a repeat of that or feel like that again.
Mm. Football feeds off of emotion, and I mean, certainly
For
from
sure.
watching from the TV, it was strange. But I think presenters yourself, I'm sure, like, and in general, like, did a good job to be able to manage the balance, because I suppose it
Mm,
can be difficult. I feel like viewers can be a bit sometimes where we want too much in the case, and so
mm.
finding the balance for every game. Do you approach certain games differently, or do you have the same style for every game? No matter what, I'm not changing my approach.
Yeah, it's interesting. My approach is honestly, my approach is not too complex. My approach is just to be myself. And I think that when I'm myself, my approach just organically changes dependent on the environment, dependent on who's involved, what the story is. And so I think the way that I sort of prepare is to under prepare. I have a lot of knowledge and acquired knowledge from over the years, and you're constantly, when I'm not working, I'm studying, I'm researching, I'm consuming. So while I'm doing that, that's my preparation. So when I say I go underprepared, when it comes to a match day and I've got to travel and move, and I'm just focusing on just relaxing and taking care of myself, knowing that I know already what to offer the audience from a, let's say, from an informative perspective, from a statistical perspective. But when I get there, I'll let the environment complement my knowledge and we'll see what I provide. I think that just works for me. I was also like that. I was also like that in my days of high school. Go back to those days where I knew what I knew and I wouldn't cram or overstudy because I've consumed over the course of the year, I've consumed the information. Now, this may not work for everyone, but for me, I was confident and comfortable in the knowledge I already had, that when it comes time to deliver, I'll do the very best I can, and I'll make a good account of myself, and we'll live with we'll live with the outcome. So that's sort of how I operate. But that's again just me being myself, and I try and be as natural as possible. Exactly like I'm talking to you now is how exactly I try to be when I'm on camera or hosting an event. I don't ever try and there's no act. There's no act. I just like to bring my natural self, and then I'll adapt to the surroundings around me.
Mm, mm. What's the best piece of advice you've got in for presenting?
The best piece of advice specifically for presenting I've got is exactly along the lines of what I've just said there. But be yourself. Be yourself. You can look up to others, you can admire others' work, but if you try to mimic someone else from a presentation sense, it's not going to work. It's absolutely not going to work. Now, there are some tricks, there are some tips that I often share with people that you can absolutely implement to make yourself even better, but it is just about staying true to yourself. Now, it seems very, very simple. However, if you start to study that a little more and you see certain TV talent presenters in any capacity, not just in football, across the board on television, you can see those that perhaps aren't speaking naturally, that aren't themselves. And it is very clear to see. Now, that may still work. It's not that that doesn't work. But my foundation, my mantra is always about maximizing my potential. That is everything I come back to at all times. And in order to do that, I believe that anyone will make the best account of themselves if they are true to themselves and being themselves. And so if you've got a beautiful, warm personality, whatever your positive traits are, allow that to flourish on camera, because the camera will pick that up. But the moment you start to try to do something or be something or think ahead of time, you're losing sense from your true self. And I think that will ultimately impact your potential to maximize your performance on camera. So it is super important. And there, again, as I said, there are some really important techniques and traits in terms of body posture, stance, where you're balancing your weight, that can really assist that, to ensure that when you're presenting to camera and you see lights and cameras and you're not speaking to an audience, it can be unnatural. So it's just about creating an environment physically and mentally that brings out the best version of you. And that's always simple advice I had from the very start that I've always stayed true to.
100%. I can literally tell the passion, for the presenting. I mean, I guess it's that, isn't it? It's that because it's natural, so you don't feel like you have to lose yourself in the role, which I think is really important. Did you struggle with that at the beginning, or is it that always been the case of, I know you said, that I have been the way I am the whole way, but particularly when it became more camera work, and was it, it can be quite easy. I've been guilty of that when I started this, of like playing up to it a little bit, but did you find that at the start, or from the beginning it was just, I know I need to be myself, that's it?
Yeah. Yeah, look, I don't want to say that I'm perfect, because I'm absolutely not. And you're constantly learning. But in the best way that I have, I've just always tried to stay true to those simple focus points. And no, in the start, I certainly was nowhere near the level that I've grown to now. However, it was just about embracing and controlling what you could control. So yes, in the earlier periods, look, even again, back when I was in school, I always used to do talks in front of the school, and I used to do, so I've always, for whatever reason, people always ask me, why are you interested in this? I have no idea. Like, I love communicating with people. I'm Italian background, right? So in Italy, it's all about speaking and talking and people and family and friends and just conversation. So I've always loved the idea of presenting to people and talking in front of people. So having never had issues with that, even as a teenager, the transition to working in this space, and obviously it doesn't happen overnight, because I went from a written background. I started writing for, if you know goal.com,
Yeah.
Goal.com, many, many years ago. I started writing for them from Australia Online. So I really strengthened my writing side of the industry. And then I transitioned into radio. And again, a tip I have for everyone or anyone who wants to work in TV, if you can perfect radio, then television becomes a hell of a lot easier, because in radio, you only have your voice. You don't have appearance, gestures, graphics. There's nothing but your voice. So how well can you tell a story? Now, I very recently was listening to some of my work from radio from well over a decade ago. And in those few years, I could hear the improvement. And you're your best critic. You're your best judge. That's where I really flourished. Working on radio first as a guest and then as a host, it really took me to a level that when I went into TV, I felt ready. Now, obviously, I've improved a lot since I started in TV, and you're working in front of cameras and lights, and it's very abnormal and unnatural. But once you get the hang of that, I had already put the work in to, again, not perfect, it's the wrong word, but to certainly strengthen myself in terms of my verbal communication, in terms of my written communication, which when it comes time to presenting, I can write a script now in seconds, because I sort of know the structures, I know how it works. Radio taught me keep things short and sharp, keep things succinct and clear. Once you have those basic strengths, again, not perfected, but to a level where you're certainly competent, delivering on TV in a natural manner with appearance, with other things going on behind you, there's a lot more to work with. So I actually felt that transition was a lot smoother than it could have been, because I had already had a lot of practice. So it's all part of the journey. And again, this is another thing for me. I've always focused on controlling what I can control in the journey. I've had objectives, which I've ticked off over the years, but I've very rarely been goal focused. I've been growth focused. And with being growth focused, the goals have just sort of happened without really thinking about them. And that's been a really cool part when you look back and reflect. It's like, okay, that happened very quickly, but in actual fact, it didn't, because there was many, many, many years of work behind it.
100%. So well said. One of those goals, well, I don't know if it was one of the goals you had when you began, but it's just out of my own personal curiosity, was that you've got to interview some amazing people in the industry. I just want to know, like, what is it like standing in front of someone who, is such a high performing person? So they've got their own agendas, their own confidence, their own belief. How do you are able to maintain, again, this idea of calmness? And some people might feel imposter syndrome, right? Standing in front of someone who's achieved something. How are you able to just stay in the moment, especially in that maybe that 10 seconds before you're about to hit live, and go, right, I know what I need to do. This is still just another person.
Yeah. Yeah, look, this is certainly, I never embarked on my industry to, I don't know, there was never really a strong focus on buddying up with top names globally or whatnot. But this is something that has organically happened over time, purely because of the fact that, again, I bring a level of normality to what I do. And because I never call myself a journalist, because a journalist to a footballer is someone who's trying to get that hook, get that line, get that scoop. I'm a presenter. And again, all I'm doing, like at the matches, I'm trying to bring the viewer, the fan, closer to the action. With the players specifically, football, I do a lot of tennis as well. What I try to always do is to just keep it cool, keep it calm, keep it chill, very normal, as I would if I meet any random person on the street. Now, when it comes to these individuals, sure, they're top figures, they've done very cool stuff, they're at the top of their game globally, and I respect that. But that's where it sort of stops. I respect, I admire, I'm motivated and inspired, but I'm not in awe. And I have built some really strong, and again, not the reason, not the motivation for doing it, but I've built some really strong relationships with top players globally because of that, because they sort of sense that, okay, this is just another guy like us. He's on his journey doing his thing, and that's great. And that's sort of the relationship. And it's been great to have repeated interviews with these individuals, particularly because you start to build an actual relationship, which is really cool. It's helpful for my work. It's good for their work too, because they're getting PR out of what I do. Not that they need it, but it's a sort of win-win relationship. And so that's how I do it. I know that may sound a little simpler than it is, because if you're standing beside, Messi, Ronaldo, Mbappe, Neymar, and these huge names, the big names of today. Recently, I've had Kane and Haaland. Yeah, okay, it's like, wow, these guys are a real deal, big time, and they are. But in that moment when I'm with them, it's certainly, I'm like, okay, I've seen Cristiano warm up 1,000 times on the pitch beside me. Now we're just having a quick chat and we'll move on. I think it's more not in the moment, but upon reflection, when you're like, okay, that's cool. Yeah, that's cool. Because I've seen other people do that. I've done that now. I'll do that again. It's a cool thing. It's a cool thing to reflect on. But in that moment, it's just, I see them all the time anyway. We're working in the same space. They may make a little bit more money, but that's cool. But it's just part of it all. And again, just focusing on channeling that energy, as we go back to what we discussed off the top, to perform and exert yourself at the right time with the right level of energy at the right moment. And by doing that, you create very organic relations, which is something I love, because something I'm most passionate about is meeting people. I love meeting people. I love learning from people, talking to people, listening to people. And when you get to mix with people who are super successful, as top footballers are, it's a really, really cool experience.
Mm-hmm. Do you, moving forwards now, looking to the future, because as you said, I'm sure, like, you've spoken about teaching, you've spoken about all these lessons that you have learned to how to channel your energy. Now you said you teach people or help people with their own journeys. Do you actually find teaching people is making you a better presenter, or maybe giving you the chance to reflect more on the processes? Because I guess if it becomes habitual, sometimes you forget. But I guess if you're reaffirming these messages, does that help you to go, right, I just remember this is what I need to do. This is what I've taught myself and learned. And it just keeps that ticking, thought process.
For sure. Yeah, absolutely. I feel, firstly, I love to help people. That's the first thing. So if any advice or assistance can be of any benefit to anyone, you take a level of satisfaction from that you don't from most other walks of life. So I'm really happy to dedicate time to doing that because I know when I was starting, there weren't too many people who offered that. And the industry's cutthroat. I still have people who definitely don't want to help me. It's part and parcel of the industry. It's very competitive. People are very defensive. But I'm a bit of an open book because I think that, where we get one shot at life, you're not here too long. If you can help people make someone's day, put a smile on someone's face, there's nothing more rewarding. And I'll carry on and do what I do anyway. And that's how the world works. I love teaching, and I think I will do more of that as I go into the future because I am really passionate about it. But in answer to, does it help me reinforce what I know? Absolutely. And this is something I'm always cautious about because it's very easy, like anything in life, that when things become normal, to just go through the motions. And I sometimes, especially when I'm running on very low fuel, I can go to a match and I can just go back to the systems and procedures I know and not really think and execute, and it's adequate. But I want to continually be getting better. And sometimes if you are just going through the motions, it's very easy not to look. It's not that you have to make the most of every second of every day, but I mean the opportunities I get that when I'm pitch side here or hosting that event, I want to perform at the highest level possible because, like a footballer coming through the ranks, wanting to continually grow and reach the top clubs in the world, you don't know who's watching on that day. You don't know who's going to be there with an agenda or whatnot. So it's just about you get every opportunity you get. Don't take it for granted because you don't know what tomorrow holds. And I think it's a really important thing to just keep yourself honest, to maintain a clear focus on that. You can always grow and improve and just keep new fresh opportunities open. So I love doing that because by sharing with other people, it reinforces to me, yes, what I already know, but what I need to make sure that it's at the forefront of the mind as I embark on future opportunities as well.
I think that's a great place to finish. Adriano, thank you so much for your time. Where can people find you, or if they want to reach out to you, what's the best way they can contact you?
Look, you can follow all of my works and travels, Instagram and Twitter. It's just at Adrian Del Monte, so no O on the Adriano. But again, anyone who wants to reach out in future questions, advice, anything like that, LinkedIn is the best tool for that. And I always encourage a lot of younger people to make sure that they're active on there because it's a nice way as well to learn about who works in the industry, how industries work, and you just stay up to date with things. And I think it's a really important social media tool, despite there being so many these days. But I really think it's still got its unique edge with being that business social media tool that can be really effective for particularly someone coming through and just learning and connecting with the right people.
Absolutely. I agree. Thank you very much for your time. Thank you very much to everyone for listening, and I hope to see you in the next episode. Take care and peace.